Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. My name's Brandon Newcott. I'm chair of the mentorship committee this year, and we have some great speakers lined up for you tonight. I'll let Roland Lau, our moderator, introduce each one here, but just a little breakdown of how we're going to run the meeting. We'll have each speaker introduce themselves. We have a section of a selection of questions too that we could ask the speakers, or if you happen to have brought some your own, we'll also have a question and answer section of the event. And no breakout rooms. Everyone's going to be in one room, so everyone gets to hear the same conversation. And we really want to get as much participation from the crowd as possible. So anything pops into your head, feel free to, you could either post it in chat or just, raise your hand or start a conversation. And with that, I will hand it off to Roland.
Thank you, Brandon. Tonight, and this one to show you that we appreciate the sponsors, the AIASF, and their different levels that make these programs possible. So we just showed this for that purpose, to recognize them. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit about panelists. And so we're going to go through each one, and they have 5 minutes each. We're going to talk a little bit about their background, or maybe a little bit about the mentorship program in their organization, and then we'll go through the scenarios. So without further ado, I'm going to start with Lourdes.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Lourdes Garcia. I'm a senior architect and section manager at the Bureau of Architecture at Public Works. I've only been with Public Works for about 4.5 years. I had my own practice for about 15 years, and prior to that, have been working in the Bay Area since 1987. When I moved out here from Florida, I had graduated from the University of Florida and decided I wanted to work in the Bay Area. Lots of great things were happening out here. I've taught various architectural studios, mostly at the California College of Arts. And I still participate there in the school's professional development program, working with students one-on-one. At the Bureau, I oversee and manage a studio, which is, we call them sections at Public Works. There are about 5 sections at the Bureau that are, each section oversees work for different city clients. Mine in particular, we do projects in the section for the public library.
Lourdes, your voice is starting to crackle, so maybe turn on the video, off the video maybe.
Okay. So yeah, in my department, in my studio, we deliver projects to the library, the police department, the fire department. We've also been working recently for the last couple of years with HSH, which is a new city department, which focuses on homeless shelters, navigation centers, etc. I co-lead the mentorship program at BOA with the technical manager, Vito Venoni, and we've been working for the last couple of years to kind of put something in place to help staff along in their careers. Next. Okay, this is Margaret Hayward Playground, which recently opened. Our key overall goals for the department is to basically engage and empower staff and retain them as long as possible, because we build in we build in a lot of learning for our city projects with our staff. With that, we also hope to help them with leadership skills as they move in public service, and always look to diversify our skill sets in the department. There's just a lot that goes into what we do as architects. Next. Just real quick, here's some projects. Public safety building on the left for the police department, on the upper right and middle. 1550 Evans, it's under construction right now. It's a very large project for PUC, Maxine Hall Health Center for Department of Public Health, and our last navigation center along the Embarcadero for HSH. Next.
Lord, is the police station is quite large.
It's large. It's a very large project. Yeah, it's along 3rd Street. It's near the ballpark, if you're familiar with San Francisco. And there's a fire department there, a fire station, as well as a police department. This is one of the last fire stations that we completed in the marina. Along with our goal one to build leaders, we try to really actively recruit a diverse candidate pool within our department. We look to help our staff define their long-term goals and set their kind of career growth opportunities. And with everything, we hope to, at every opportunity, build management and leadership skills through their projects and through their own personal goals. Next. A little bit on the left, you could see the Opera House that was restored. That was a big project of ours. Just to set things clear here, in our department, we build our mentorship program through our strategic plan, and it starts off every year with a performance plan that has a goal for each staff to set a career development goal. And so with that, we help them one-on-one to develop what that is. We want them to think about their, it could be a goal for the year or a 5-year plan. And with each plan, each year, we help them kind of define a pathway to get to their goal. All the training is generally funded. One of the great things about working with public sector is that the city does really support a lot of training and funding that goes along with that training. Next. These are 2 libraries, Ortega Branch Library and Potrero Hill Library. Next. Our animal care and control, which recently opened, won several awards, I think 4 and counting. Let's see. So through our coaching, we hope to help each staff define where they need to be. We have a matrix that establishes, their knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSA, so they know kind of the target that they need to hit as they grow as architects and leaders. We have coaching and detailing seminars, which help them, learn effective practices and different tools and methods to do the work that they do. Recently, our young staff put together a buddy system for software coaching so that they can help each other out without having senior oversight. Just, we're stuck. How do we get through this? Working with just different softwares that we use. We have peer-to-peer coaching and our one-to-one mentorship through pairings in the office. And that's a big, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Lourdes. So we're going to turn to David Lebo now and have him talk about himself and the program. David?
All right. Thank you, Roland. Well, hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. A little bit about me. Grew up in Ohio, went to the University of Cincinnati, a degree in architecture, but I am a certified planner. I wear a number of hats. I'm at Perkins Eastman and have been with Perkins Eastman for 20 years, practically. And on one side, and we'll have to compare notes. I help coordinate and manage everything that relates to post-secondary education across the entire firm. So one of my favorite stories is actually picking for Mayor Bloomberg where the new police academy for the NYPD went from a police helicopter, which this remains a career highlight. It's not a regular occurrence. We have around 200 to 250 people who touch our higher education, college and university work on an annual basis and help coordinate. And as you can imagine, there's a tremendous number of people across our 24 different studios with different knowledge and helping to knit them all together. I also do a lot as it relates to bringing in new teams for such a large firm. And obviously, as that sort of plugs into our work with colleges and universities across North America in particular, but also globally. More pertinent to this session this evening, I'm one of the founders and co-principal in charge of Perkins Eastman's internal mentoring program, which we believe is probably one of the largest firm-sponsored mentoring and professional development programs in our industry. When I sent this to Roland, we were at 750 participants for 2022, but actually we're now up to around 775. I got a number, but that's around 70% of the entire organization. And so it's a really amazing platform for how we knit together knowledge, probably one of our most cost-effective and impactful ways of knitting together knowledge across our organization. Next, Roland. Just a little bit about the work that I do with that background in both architecture and planning. The work that I do with our education teams is really on the strategy side in particular. When I do get in front and interact with clients, this is a recent award-winning project that we just opened at at Washington University in St. Louis, McKelvey Hall. It sort of stems out of a College of Engineering master plan that the team had done for the entire university, and we were one of 3 firms, along with Moore Rubel Udell and Karen Timberlake, expanding the east end of the campus. For those that are familiar with WashU, it has the public-facing sides of their buildings have a very strict adherence, for the most part, to a collegiate Gothic architecture. This building that we did, which was for computer science education and research, was at the front door of the university along Brookings Drive, facing Forest Park, which is one of I think the largest urban park in the state, slightly larger than Central Park. And so 2 sides of it had to have the yield, which you can see actually everything in this picture that Roland's got up on the screen is brand new. And Perkins Eastman, we don't tend to do a lot of things with gargoyles and finials and such, but that was something that the Board of Trustees really wanted. The glass, though, is a very high performance facade that really sort of tries to strike at the duality that exists in computer science from a philosophy standpoint. So that idea of sort of, looking at different things and sort of designing for our era, but also designing for the context of the campus. Next, Roland. That glassy bit, which you can see here sort of in the evening, looks into the various sort of research neighborhoods. So we think very deeply around sort of human psychology. We have on staff environmental and behavioral psychologists. I am on the hunt for an anthropologist, if anyone's out there. And I would always like to add that to the team. But really that idea of the sort of the glass area is really becoming that area that is a lot of the collaboration zones of the building. Next, Roland. And then here you can see on the inside, really looking at that, we have a variety of different ways that we look at, so we call it cave to cafe, and sort of, a number of us, when we think about our users and stakeholders, we look at different types of personas and how different people occupy introverts and extroverts. And it's a sort of a type of sensitivity in our education work that also sort of informs how we as an organization think about our own internal teams and trying to meet them where they are as architects and designers and planners and strategists and people who do marketing and accounting, etc. So I think roll next. Just another quick project. This is another one at Rutgers University in Camden, New Jersey, where I'm coming to you all from New York today, but I was in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, and took a wrong turn and ended up in Camden, but I was always happy to see our award-winning building here. It's one where it really sort of ties together a lot of urban thoughtfulness, really activating a streetscape. You can see that the urban fabric in downtown Camden, for those that aren't familiar, has eroded significantly over the last 50 years. And one of the big pushes for that university is it invests, Rutgers has a number of campuses, but as they invest in Camden is really trying to bring back that urban fabric and putting sort of the educational activities on display. Next. And with that, this is actually the building. The top 2 floors are nursing and the bottom 2 floors are science, sort of both of which are undergraduate education. The City Hall and for Camden and the park is in the background, and it fronts a light rail station, which you can see blurred out, and really trying to give a sense of that vibrancy facing the light rail station. Next. And then just some beautiful architecture done on a public budget. This won an AIA National Design Excellence Award in Education in 2019, right before the pandemic. Next row. And then just another shot of that. That glassy bit is the sort of the home base for the nursing students, because they proverbially actually live in the building and they're there for most hours of the day. Next. And then just an inside shot. Next. So to jump a little bit to over the Perkins Eastman mentoring program, and I don't have too many slides on it because some of it is a little bit, I don't want to say a closely guarded secret, but it is something that is a big part of Perkins Eastman and distinguishes us, we think, the experience of working in the firm from other organizations. A little bit about the firm. We do have 1,100 people globally. We do a lot around sort of the idea of T-shaped designers, people who can think both broadly about the practice and how they fit into it, but also are anchored in some sort of subject matter expertise, whether that's a type of practice or whether that's, say, sustainability or a technical expertise or what have you. We do have integrated environmental and behavioral psychologists that inform a lot of our work, particularly our upstream research and programming and strategy work. We are a single profit center. And for those that have been at any particular firm for a long time, particularly ones that are sort of large and complicated, that is a big difference from ones that have multiple profit centers. It sort of really helps to incentivize all coming together. But finally, we have our global mentoring program, which is really one of our best knowledge sharing platforms across the 1,100 of us at Perkins Eastman. Next. And just a little bit, I think this is my last slide, but unlike some mentoring programs that are sort of focused around folks that are just coming right out of college or just joining the organization, ours is a soup to nuts. Everybody, the entire organization, whether you're on the design side, whether you're on one of the support department side, everyone is encouraged to participate. And that is from whether you've just joined the firm to our CEOs and our founders participate in our executive participate in the program. And as people move through their career, the way the program engages them changes. So if you were early in your career, there's a lot of focus around what we call anchoring. It's really learning how to be a professional, how to sort of fit within a complex, large organization and learn how to begin to navigate it within sort of your geographic studio, the context thereof. As you begin to move towards an intermediate stage, intermediate part of your career, it's really looking to how can we begin to develop expertise? How do you begin to build your network beyond the immediate geography or the practice, the building typology that you specialize in as you start to hit moments where you maybe are doing sort of a lot of specialization. And then as we begin to get folks that are moving really that are sort of principal partner track or already there, what does leadership begin to look like? Are they taking on roles where they're managing a geography or they're managing a region? And then finally, Pioneer, that is one, we've not done that yet. The program is only in its 7th year, but Pioneer is actually one where we're looking to then begin to break the program out from an internal program and begin to partner our most senior folks with leaders well beyond the field of architecture to sort of co-solve different types of problems and how architecture might say partner with, say, if you're an assistant secretary of education at the Department of Education and solves K-12, learning outcome kind of interesting questions. The middle is just a chart in terms of the participation over the 7 years as I was mentioning earlier, and sort of that just incredible growth as we've moved through, and just how a simple rollout of this program has really transformed Perkins, Eastman, and the way that we sort of get to know each other, as opposed to just being 24 different siloed locations. And then because there's so much choice, we give, beyond just the anchor, develop, lead, and pioneer, we give people sort of particular pathways that they can choose from. The pairing of folks is a bit built like I want to say sort of like the Tinder of mentoring, or the mentoring of Tinder of mentoring, in the way that you can kind of go through and there's all these profiles, and there's no actual swiping left or right, but you pick people and there's matching and what have you. It's as you can imagine, 775 people is a lot of people to potentially sort of wade through and try to find a mentor. So you can look at things like, were you interested as a mentee in exploring balance, your career? Journey is a new one with really in particular focuses on DEI and equity initiatives, networking, as well as if you want to sort of focus in on any kind of technical skills. So, Roland, I might have gone over 5 minutes, sorry. So, thanks.
For those who don't know, I'm also with Perkins Eastman, and I'm involved in the mentorship program there. And it is really a very complex in the way that when you have so many people involved, just trying to match it, matching processing. The process is quite extraordinary. But I'm going to turn it over now to Midi, and it's all yours, Midi.
Hi guys, welcome to the panel. My name is Mide Akinshade. Obviously, from the sound of the name, you might be wondering where that's from. My parents are West Africans, and I was born in the DC area, where spent some formative years before going back to West Africa as a 4-year-old, and then coming back truly after some formative years as a 17-year-old. And then residing in the DC area since then, which explains why I proceeded to the University of Maryland, College Park, for my bachelor's degree in architecture. And upon graduating, decided to try the professional world, and got mired in it, deep enough in it that I spent some 10 years working before I decided I needed to go back and get my master's, because I wanted a thesis under my belt, and also use it as almost as an independent study in a subject matter that I was interested in. So I went back to the University of Maryland, my alma mater, and got my master's, as well as a certificate in urban design, a master's in architecture. And subsequently then started working in firms in the DC area, primarily at RTKL in Baltimore, which I moved to Baltimore then to just work with them. Actually, you know, I was at RTKL when I went back to grad school, and then I returned back to RTKL, spent a year then after, and decided to try other international firms. Did a stint at Smith Group for a couple of years. And I think one of the reasons I left Smith Group, although Smith Group as we know it is actually quite a large firm now, but the practice in DC wasn't as diversified as I had hoped. You know, having had a taste at RTKL of doing global projects across the globe, I was hoping for a varied typology of projects. So I left there and then proceeded to HOK in Washington, DC, and spent some 9 years there. That's actually where I met Brandon. We worked together. And while I was there, I worked on a myriad of international projects, as well as local projects. And, you know, decided to try other establishments, and went to Gensler. And at Gensler, I was there for a couple of years as a senior, and in all these offices, I was a senior project designer, working on designing projects across the globe. I left Gensler right before the pandemic and started my own firm, Aia Mentorship, which, you know, starting a new firm and then the next month, the pandemic starting, wasn't wasn't the most what's the word? It was one of those most challenging things where everything dropped and nobody knew if anybody was returning to work. But I had been talking to Perkins and Will before, actually before I established my own firm when I was at Gensler, and they reached out during the pandemic, expressing interest as a in a design leadership role in some of their offices. One of them being in North Carolina and in Houston. I took on the Houston challenge because it's a place that I've never been in, but also saw the potential in the city as an well, it's already established city, but it's a newly emerging city with a population and demographic shift of people from the West Coast, moving to Texas, Austin, Houston in particular, and people from the East Coast as well, me being one of them, deciding to make that jump to Houston. And currently I am the design director at Perkins and Will Houston. And in that capacity, with regards to mentorship, I think everybody on the panel is sort of have a very unique perspective as to how they're approaching it. Being in a design leadership role, and especially as a design director, I've sort of approached mentorship. Obviously all these places that I've worked for have the different programs, right? That sort of looks at it outside in, inside out, 10,000 feet in the air, really zoomed in. But I've leveraged a unique opportunity because if you see there at the last bullet point there, I've been a lecturer at the University of Maryland since 2004 as an adjunct professor. And I'm still there currently, even though, thanks to Zoom and Teams, you can, conduct crits and juries over long distances. So I'm still affiliated with them, but but I've always leveraged that opportunity as a professor to sort of broaden this notion of mentorship by sort of looking at how to sort of help bridge the gap between academia and the practice. And also looking at, in my position that I am in Perkins and Will as a design director, one of the interesting and intriguing things about Perkins and Will as to why I joined them was this notion of that every project sort of operates under this concept of living design, where we sort of look at any given project holistically, not just the built project, but we'll look at the sustainability of it, the resiliency of it, the equity component of it to make sure we're designing for inclusive spaces and whatnot. In a sense, looking at a project as if it's a complete living ecosystem. And within that sort of the inclusivity and equity component of it has been quite intriguing to me. And I sort of leveraged my position in academia in terms of how we're approaching mentorship through inclusivity, overlaying it with what I'm learning now at Perkins and Will. I remember right before the pandemic, during the whole George Floyd thing, the whole practice was in a disarray as to like how we practice and how we make the profession more inclusive, how we design spaces that are inclusive. And I remember being in academia, us having the same conversation. How do we make academia, especially the architecture experience, much more equitable? How do you do that? How do you how do you approach it from a curriculum aspect? And I remember in one of the, I have some very astute colleagues and professors there that were bent on sort of creating that, wrapping that into the curriculum, and they challenge all the professors in terms of like, how do you teach your course in an inclusive manner? And I remember one of the professors there, structures professor, saying, I don't know how to teach structures, and but structure is based on facts. A building stands up or a building falls down. That's what I teach. And I remember saying to him, well, have you thought about teaching this aspect of structures using an indigenous building or using a teepee or an African building to talk about the structural system? It is universal, but you can find them outside of these canon that we're used to that then broadens that sort of subject matter of inclusivity. So I leverage mentorship in that manner by sort of looking at the pipeline of these younger architects, future architects that are coming into the practice, and then my involvement with as a design director, and especially under this umbrella of the living design, I try to sort of find intersections or intersectionalities between both of those polar opposites. So I'm sorry, I've talked a lot, but I'm just going to run through a few projects. And these projects run the gamut from the different firms I've worked for. This was a project I designed while I was at HOK. It's for, if anybody's been to Union Station in DC, they're thinking of building over the tracks in the back, to sort of have this overbuild. It's a project by Ackridge, but HOK and a firm in DC, Shalom Baranis, they did the contextual buildings, the offices and stuff, but the HOK's design studio in DC did the train shed that sits on top of those tracks. The main station is to the right off the page there, but it was an interesting design that was starting to sort of see how we can make transportation green. This is another project I worked on at HOK. This is a science and technology building for the University of Maryland, Baltimore. It's a building for the School of, it's a research facility that's being shared by 3 different schools. The School of Dentistry, that's to the right there, School of Pharmacy, that's to the left, and right in the picture is the School of Medicine. So this building kind of sits in the middle where they collaborate, a series of wet labs and dry labs and computational spaces, nanomedicine, all that stuff. But it was an interesting design, collaborating with the campus, working on doing this building in this part of Baltimore that, University of Maryland, downtown Baltimore is an urban campus. How do you relate to the context? How do you relate to the community and create a compound that's not walled off from the community, that creates urban spaces that people can enjoy? Next slide this is one of the projects. I don't know, Brandon, if you were working at HOK when we were working on this. This was a project we were designing for King Abdullah Petroleum Sciences and Research Center, CAPSARC. It's a think tank in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where they're quite smart. They're wealthy and smart, looking at the future of energy. They know fossil fuel is going to run out eventually, so they're making a jump at it. They created this community that invites scientists from all over the world to study the next big thing in energy. And HOK did the master planning for the project, which is what you see there. Zaha Hadid actually did the building to the right there. But we master planned it, designed all the residences, the public facilities. But this particular project was the mosque that is, I wish my cursor were working, but it sits in the middle of the project. No, it's to the left. Yeah, that guy. Thank you. Some people might look at it and thought it looked weird and planned, but obviously, per customs, customary notion, it needs to point to Mecca. But it's this building that sits, this jewel that sits in the middle of the campus. It was completed in 2009, I believe. But it was a project that it was a labor of love, because from its concept and just trying to, because the notion of this very platonic box that sits in the middle of the campus, the original idea actually had it levitating off the ground. But, and we've gone through several design iterations, and then we heard back that the king, when he visits, because the king has to come and bless it as part of the project, they were like, the king is not going to approach this building and go down and then go up. He needs to enter it great. And that just killed me, because I was like, no, they took the concept away. But I was able to sort of reimagine it by sort of creating this moat around it to still create that notion of levity. The interior obviously is playing, actually the whole project is this notion of dematerializing the age-old mashrabiyya that we know is in the Middle East, looking at it at different scales to sort of create this sheath on the inside that modulates light. And also, the appearance in the daytime is these light filtering through these filigree, right? But at night, it does the reverse, where the light is glowing from inside. And sort of, these are not the best shots to show that, but the project is built, it's won numerous national and international awards. Obviously, it's a team effort. It's not like, when you're working in a firm, it's not like you sit down and, you're not Michelangelo. That doesn't happen anymore. So obviously, you're working with a team of really brilliant people to sort of bring this to life. Next project This was a tower that I worked on in HOK as well. It's a building in Dalian, China. They wanted to design this skyscraper that has offices in the first 30 floors, I believe, and then apartments as well as hotel. And the idea here was looking at the customs in Dalian. I remember in some of the precedent images I was looking at the onset, this idea of a pagoda that is customary. And also it's a historic shipping town. So this idea of a sail married with this pagoda was sort of the concept. It's sort of, I remember the first concept model I built, and I was showing it to Bill Helmuth, who's the CEO and the design director. And this idea of this sort of piece of cloth that gets caught in this pagoda as if it's billowing in the wind, and obviously working with the team to sort of make it this project. Now we submitted it and we were eager to go. And this building in front of it is a building by Coop Himmelblau. It's a convention center. And it's actually built right now. But the client came back at the last minute and said, yeah, we really like it, but we'd love to be able to see the tower to have the same silhouette no matter where you are in the city. And we were like, well, that's not the idea. They were like, well, no, we need it to look symmetrical, basically, so that anywhere that you're in the city, it's the same silhouette across the sky. So we had to take the scheme and revolve it, literally revolve that idea. And I lost interest after that, because I was, this idea of this very simple form and this tapering form was kind of, it still looks good. There's a hole in the ground, and I think eventually it'll get built. This was a project I did at at Gensler. It was part of the Amazon HQ2 pursuit. This was one of the leading sites near Dulles Airport, but it was like a lot of master planning on this huge, I think it was maybe 300-acre site. It has a quarry in it, a functioning quarry that we were hoping we could amenitize in the future as they plan this idea of bucolic urbanism. We know them on the Northwest, they have this sort of very urban centric campus, but we were trying something different here. That can you have an urban campus that kind of sits in a bucolic setting? And they were on board, but we lost the fight to the Arlington site, which I think this site is much better, but I'm biased. And I think this might be the last image. Yes.
Thank you, Midi and David and Lourdes, for giving us an introduction to your background. And what we're going to do right now is just start we're going to cover 5 scenarios if we can. And we're trying to keep it as fluid as possible. And we've asked the panelists to just chime in as they come up. So the first scenario is that you have been hired by a firm. Why is mentoring noted as part of your job description? Because, I don't know if you've seen a lot of the ads that have been coming out for the last couple of years. They all said they want you to be a mentor to. So are we assuming that the staff is finished? That's my question. We went through college already, got our degrees in architecture. We may have gotten the license, and now we have to be mentored still. Staff, some of them are licensed or not, and some of them are studying, get licensed. So why is mentorship such a big thing in firms that are hiring? It's in their job descriptions. Also, I don't know, Lourdes, you want to start out answering that question, maybe?
Let's see. We have such a different hiring process in the city that probably David and Mikey have in the private sector. But I would say in general, I've been working at this 5 years. I'm still learning something new every day, where our profession is it's just never ending. It's we learn about new materials, we learn how they together in different ways. Each project has very different programs that we have to work with. It's never ending. And we're only in this career for a period of time, and you have to pass the baton, right? So it's really, really important that mentoring is part of your job description. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, for me, that happens at every level. You could be a senior person mentoring, you could be a junior person mentoring. It really happens across the board, and it has to happen at every level. We have to share what we learn. We have to help each other learn new things, reach new levels. Everybody has different career paths. We are fortunate enough to have a career that is very broad in architecture, and we're kind of privileged that way. So I would say, yeah, I would say assume that the second you start, your part of what you do will be mentoring at whatever level you're in.
Lourdes, you were starting to crack at the end, but I think the gist of it, and I totally agree. David or Midi, do you want to give your?
Well, I have a question for Lourdes, because I think this is really fascinating when we think about, government is obviously there's a structure to it, but institutions, and when you're thinking, because I absolutely agree with everything you said, and I want to actually, I think Roland, at some point I'd like to sort of touch on. We're looking to set up an emeritus initiative, because when we think about and people have never retired before, right? People who have founded firms and joined big firms, they've never had to, they've never worked in a big organization. They've always sort of been a principal that when they've said choice, that choice was listened to, and it's an interesting learning curve. But when you think about the way you all steward mentoring, I mean, are people able to connect beyond the bureau elsewhere within San Francisco city government?
Within San Francisco city government, do you mean like with other city departments and entities?
Yeah. Like say someone had an interest in sustainability policy and they wanted to.
Yeah, we also do. We work closely with the Department of the Environment. They set a lot of regulations for city projects specifically.
Lourdes, your voice is cracking.
Okay, let me turn off my video here. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, we actually work across departments too. We have this. We have, in terms of environmental work, we have the Office of the Environment at the city that we have to work closely with. Planning department, building department, all those departments we work very closely with. We don't get anything extra. We have to go through all the same avenues as everybody else to pull a permit, let's say. But there are people that have different career paths. We have people that have transferred into DBI, which is our permitting department, because that's what they want to do, plan check. We have people that have transferred into the planning department, construction management, building, Bureau of Project Management, and the Department of the Environment. So there are different, like if you said a career path and you said, I really want to work here, we have a rotation opportunity that you could do a rotation in any one of those departments for about 6 months and try it out and get experience within that. And if you want to come back, that your position is still open. If you want to look and seek for a transfer, then we can look to see how we can make that happen.
Midi, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, and maybe I'm biased to it, again, as I was mentioning, my interest in academia and trying to sort of reach back. I think, I don't know if it's necessarily like a new awareness, but I think that's something that I've been thinking about these last few years. is actually examining our role as architects in society, just sort of kind of maybe in a mental way chastising us for not taking ourselves, for not realizing how important we are to society and not capitalizing on it enough. There was some article that I wrote a couple of months ago where I was describing architects as sort of like the vanguards of humanity, like literally and we just don't get enough credit for it. We don't sell ourselves enough. We complain about the pay is not good enough compared to doctors and stuff. I was like, literally, we shape humanity. Every time you wake up and you open your eyes and you cast a gaze across the horizon, everything you see, we designed. Like we are, and for lack of a better term, we are badass, right? Like we're just amazing. And I think part of that, I kind of see mentorship as your due right. Like if you get indoctrinated into the profession that you've committed to, this thing that we love, it just goes without saying. It's like knowing how to use a scale. Mentorship is part of it. You're keeping that lineage going. That's again, remember I said, I remember in that article I was saying, if God forbid we would have wiped off the planet and some alien race came here, the only way that anthropologically they'd be able to make sense of us is in the ruins that we've left behind. So we are really important. It's a very important profession. And as such, passing it on, as Lourdes was saying, it's like it's ingrained in it. It's like what you have to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have to keep that lineage going. And so, and like I said, and maybe it was a pandemic fog that just had me thinking expansively as much more than prescriptively what's in front of you. And to that end, when I didn't mention in my bio, I was actually on the board for AIADC before I moved out here to Houston last year. And one of the things that we were talking about on the committee, and I had that conversation with somebody recently, was looking, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine now, Perkins, where I just got elevated to the College of Fellows. And we were congratulating him and just sitting in the conference room. And there were two people that were in the fellowship program just comparing notes, like, oh my God, like the process and like all that stuff and the format, of what this needs to be, how they try to, and I remember this particular colleague of mine, Gabrielle, she was saying, I was mentoring somebody that was being considered to be elevated and just telling them, well, make sure you get the format correct, because it'll bounce back and there's a lot of work. And I was like, oh my God, that reminds me when I was at AIADC, I remember when we were talking about the fellowship and the people being elevated. And I knew some of the people being elevated. And I also know their propensity not to want to be mentors, like in terms of like who they were and having worked with them at a particular firm. And I remember telling the committee, I was like, wouldn't it be great if part of you being considered a fellow is that you have to mentor somebody, you have to bring somebody along, right? It's not just like, okay, we give you the fellowship, you go in the living pastures and you sort of move on. It comes with responsibility. Again, it goes to what I was saying earlier about this sort of inherent responsibility that we all have as architects to continue that line. It doesn't just end at like that moment that you think, oh, I'm retiring, I'm an emeritus now or a fellow, but still making you, mentor somebody. And maybe it's about shepherding them through the process that you get, there's an accountability there that you sort of give back. So I believe, like Lourdes was saying, it's very important along every line of the profession.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to the next scenario, which is very similar. And it's you are encouraged to seek a mentor. So this is more for the people who have been more senior level. You are encouraged to seek a mentor as part of your professional development. Should you consider yourself unfinished despite the fact that you're licensed already? So it's similar to the first question. So because the thing is, like you're saying, Midi, you think that, okay, you got your degree, you got your license, you're working in the firm, you've got a lot of projects under your belt. Do you really need to be mentored by anybody else? And that's the question. Do we as senior architects need to be mentored by someone else. And I'd like to throw this one out to Lourdes, because you are a co-leader in your group. Do you have a mentor or not? Personally, I don't have one. I don't have time, in a way, but I haven't found one yet that I really want to have mentor me. But I just want to know, what do you think, Lourdes? It could be just an example that you in the past.
You know, I would say, straight up, I don't have a mentor. I'm a very senior person, but I would love a mentor. I think in our department, because we have separate studios, our peers, we kind of build off each other. We learn off each other, always looking to, I'm learning off of David and Mighty. I don't think when you reach a point of senior years, I would say, no, you're never finished. I definitely believe that wholeheartedly. You are never finished. This is a career that has to continue to build and build on itself and build on the shoulders of others who came before you, right? So I would like to have a mentor, like somebody that I can go to and say, I'm trying to achieve this. I'm trying to be a better mentor. So I would love for you to show me how you do that. How do you do that? How do you make a difference? How do you help somebody that is basically, just starting off, and help them continue to keep their passion and their vision and moving forward, because our career has a lot of bumps in the road. It's not easy to do what we do. We have to learn to mentor our staff on how to believe in what they do, how to believe in their projects, how to sell their projects, how to empower them to do what they do. Because it's a very long career, and then when you look back, you hope you've made a difference. And for me personally, making a difference isn't like really the projects that I leave behind, is really the people that I leave behind and what difference they're going to make in moving things forward. So I don't know. I'd like to hear, how David would answer that. I mean, 750 people that you're mentoring, that's a lot, right?
Yeah, no, it's obviously a very good question. I mean, one thing, a bit of a background for us, it's an opt-in program, of the 1,100 people, the 775 or so that we have now. We do sponsor the activities as a firm. So, and it is a peer-to-peer program. So it's one-to-one. It's not group. There are other venues for group mentoring, particularly through our diversity initiatives and design initiatives and leadership growth and professional development initiatives. But for this, you also, when you get a mentor as a mentee, you graduate after 2 years. So the idea is that after out of the 1,100 people, you're always growing, right? There was that sort of ladder, and it was very interesting. Our program, we were doing work. My other along the NYPD program that we did with the police academy. My other favorite career projects was actually imagining global leadership education for General Electric. And that was over the life of that both strategic and then the architectural effort, was being able to sort of kind of take crib notes around what General Electric does and the way that they would do lifelong learning. And that was, I think, going back, roll into the first question, is that, and Lourdes, as you said, we're always changing and growing. And, and that career interest, might evolve. Ours has become a thought where after 2 years, when mentees kind of graduate, sometimes they sort of take a year off. And that's completely fine. It's encouraged if you want to do that. You can come back. There's no downsides to it. But perhaps, and before we started this, we were talking about mass timber, right? There are folks now that are digging into mass timber, and maybe there's an expert out there that a mentee wants to learn. But maybe that's just 1 year. And I think another one that we've been sort of really trying to focus on is training for our mentors. So what does it mean to be a quality mentor? What kind of support are we giving them as a program? For us, there's a massive database. We have HR, that digs in, our knowledge resource team looking at all the statistics. the quality, you know, how often are folks meeting? Is there impact on it? But that after those 2 years, that the mentor is not just, you know, you don't just stop, right? And you're no longer there, but you actually become an advocate for your mentee, right? And then you're building up a constellation as you as a young architect or planner or designer, as you move through the organization and you're moving up that sort of career ladder, that you're getting folks that know how to amplify your voice, right? So when you're looking for that next promotion, that they're saying, okay, you need to meet these people, you need to do this, you want to switch into a different, you know, you want to go into multifamily as opposed to transportation, let's try to connect you to folks to do that. And you're getting this really wonderful network of advocacy that I think, hopefully, I think it's less, you know, we've got the word unfinished, but I think that there's more like a curiosity. Mita, you were sort of mentioning, you know, we do have these wonderful things that we do, and being curious about how your career can evolve and grow over time and change, and providing that support network is a wonderful thing for architecture.
Because
Yeah.
David, I was seeing in your slide that you had earlier, Pioneer, where you talked about emeritus. So you know, when I looked at the Eastman program, the mentorship program, I don't see that many senior people reaching out to others, more senior architects to mentor them necessarily, because I know there's almost a greater need from the more going the opposite way. But is that something that you think that should be looked at more as part of the Pioneer?
We haven't launched Pioneer. I mean, and just to give, not monopolize, but you know, we've got another initiative, which is the lead interoffice profession or interoffice. We actually, particularly for intermediate and sort of like associate principal kind of folks, you can pair up and have a grant of up to $2,500 to meet anywhere in the world and have a design thinking experience of your choosing. And then you get a guide that helps. And we've had people in healthcare in Mumbai and New York meet in Singapore and get tours of hospitals to look at how, you know, different Eastern and Western approaches to healthcare design. And so that, you know, that's one sort of, and I think when we looked at the Pioneer, it was modeled actually off of an initiative that General Electric did. And one was what GE was doing. It was their penultimate education course. So not the final, right, but the right before, where they were sort of training folks to enter into the top 200 officers across all of General Electric. And one of the things that they would do is they had 2 years within this sort of program, and they would pick 30 potential people that were in a position to maybe move into that 200. And General Electric would pick a country, which was Brazil. And they would go down and they would spend 2 weeks, and they all had a budget, and you had different roles and responsibility. And somebody might have hydro, and somebody might have in-country, for-country healthcare, small electronics. And it was, who do you need to meet with in the government to change the economics around what it is that is your particular business line that was your expertise? How do you do that? How do you change that? Then the groups would kind of, there were 5 groups, and they would work on, and they would kind of go back. Long-winded way is that when we look at the Pioneer, that's one where it's like, I think, Mita, you know, what does architecture do? Like, how can we actually pair some of our most senior people within the profession with some of the most senior people outside of the profession that have common problems upon which design thinking and decades of experience in leadership and design could solve? And so that's, well, and we're not there yet. We were hoping to be there, as you know, but the pandemic for all of us has sort of delayed a few things, but I think we're hoping that by 2025, we'll have that program going.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, David. I think, you know, you touch on some very interesting points. And, you know, when we think of the word mentorship, it used to have a particular meaning pre-pandemic versus now, right? How do we, you know, because work has changed. The work that we knew before the pandemic has changed. It's sort of blended into our daily lives now. We're all sitting at home. We're not sitting in an office right now, just sort of doing office work while we're at home, tending our dog, watching our kids and stuff. And with that are new pressures, right? New demands that, you know, is straining the populace like really just straining everybody really thin. And maybe straining is not the right word. It's just sort of it's created this new paradigm that we're having to deal with. And with that, what does mentorship mean in that picture? And I remember when I was at RTKL, they had a mentorship program, and I was one of the younger staff members that was sitting with the older staff members trying to craft what this mentorship program is. And I think one of the conclusions that we came to, that we were going to try it out and diversify what it means to have a mentor. And it goes to what exactly you were saying, right? That if I'm an architect, a junior architect, could I have a mentor from somebody in accounting? Because everybody's working on, we're all working from the firm. If I think I'm trying to buy my first house and I need some counseling, could I pick a mentor in accounting that they could sort of for the year shepherd me through the process? If I'm a young mother that is dealing with daycare issue, can I latch on to somebody else in a different department that might have gone through it to sort of help me shepherd it through? So it's sort of like this 360 view of mentorship that transcends just the daily drawing and drafting or moving up a career ladder, that I found particularly intriguing. And for me then, my interest lied in, being somebody that was born in a different part of the world. I just was very interested in working in other parts of the world and working on big projects. So I chose a mentor. I asked for a mentor for one of the lead designers out of like the China office. I was like, well, I've never been to China. It'd be cool to kind of see how things are done on that end. And, so there was a relationship there for like a year. So I think this notion of, mentorship, I think now that we now have an overlay of this post-pandemic, of this new way of working and the pressures it brings, I think that's a part of it that we can't ignore. That needs to be part of the conversation. And it's interesting how many organizations are choosing to deal with it. At Perkins and Will, we're still in it. We're still sort of figuring it out. But I always try to remind everyone that with the work and the mentorship comes the pressures of the daily living that's now invaded our work life that we have to contend with as well. And I don't know, Lourdes, if that's something that in your organization is a topic matter or subject matter.
Oh, oh no, I thought I was on mute. Sorry. I don't know. I have to apologize because I was in this chat and I kind of lost track. I'm so sorry. I've lost track of the conversation. If you could repeat like what the question was.
No, I was sort of just maybe it was an attempt to broaden the definition of what it means. What does mentorship means? Is it just about how I get to the next step in my career, or is it about how I get ahead in life? Period. Career and life. Now that our life and work is now merging into one post-pandemic, what it means to be a mentor is now different.
Yeah, it's a little of both. I think especially right now because they're blended, right? We have people that we're kind of helping and help them figure out how to juggle both. Work from home, how to find time for yourself, your life too, because I feel like we're working now more than ever. You wake up, it's there, it's like the computer, your project is calling for you constantly. So I do think that it's a little bit of both. I mean, as we do, I don't know, when I started going into this career, it's like you dive into it passionately. It does consume you. It's your life. And so you do have to work and help architects, figure out the balance between the two sometimes because they are heavily blended. I mean, I remember every vacation revolved around going to see like a new building that opened or new, we have to connect in different ways. And when we learn to connect in different ways and learn how to balance both and receive mentorship, you become a better architect, I think. You do your job better. Because you have a sense of, the human side to what we do and why that's important. It's just yeah, I think you have to mentor on both sides, not just the one.
Thanks, guys. Great discussion. I'm going to move to the next scenario. It says, how should gender, race, age, and experience be criteria in matching mentors and mentees to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion that mentorship should consider? And what would be the reasons not to? Because I was reading, there is when we were preparing this program, I looked on the web, and this Harvard, I think it's Harvard School of Design, for doctors, they have a very strong mentorship program where they had set up for doctors to mentor incoming doctors into their facilities at Harvard. And because they found that the doctors that were of color were not selected as much, and they were falling behind. So they set up this program so that it would be more, it would give them more, it would be more inclusive, so they had more ability. Because based on that survey, they found that those doctors that were paired up with other senior doctors that were left behind actually started moving up because they were not getting that opportunity. So the question comes back to this scenario that because I know even at Perkins Eastman, when we try to do the what we call pairing of mentors and mentees, because they would give they would make selections that give 3 or 4 mentors they want to select, and then we as the champions for the office would pair them up. And then there's always the question of, should it be based on gender, race, age, experience? And it's always turned out to be different. So I just wanted to know if you guys have an opinion. Would it be better for women to be mentoring other women, or women and men, or should an older senior person be mentoring a younger junior person, and vice versa? What do you think? Throw it out to anybody who wants to answer the question.
I'll jump in first.
All right.
I think, and Roland has the benefit of knowing the program that I'm going to talk about. But, philosophically, I think as Eastman are like, we don't want to make those, choices. We don't want to pigeonhole folks based on some sort of demographic characteristic. We do have people on their profiles. We have a huge database. There are pictures. There's your professional headshot. So obviously, people can use that for what that information that conveys. But in all of our studios, we have champions. Roland is our champion in one of our champions in San Francisco. And I think it is an interesting thing in that when our mentees pick, they have to pick between 2 and 5 mentor choices. If they pick only one mentor choice, they are not paired, and the champion follows up with them. Part of that purpose is for them to explore alternative people that they might want to have conversations with as a mentoring opportunity. The champions, however, along with HR and our knowledge resource team, do a lot of number crunching on demographics to make sure that we've got which these days gender balance is not particularly difficult for the firm to do, although it does change when you move up the leadership ranks. It still is a bit white male dominated. And we are attentive to folks that are not necessarily that white male cohort in terms of trying to make sure that they have opportunities should they want. We know we have a lot of folks that, but it's not just women that are interested in, what does it mean to try to have a family, to start a family, and be an architect that works all the crazy hours that we do, and we've got men that are very interested. Same thing, we have folks that are looking to transition genders who are looking for support on that front. And so I think we really let people self-identify on that front and just always try to create a safe space in those champions. Those conversations are private to help them guide, who might be a good match from across the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it would be very hard to have that matching matching the mentors to the mentee happen at the top level, right? I really think it has to start with the mentee. I mean, I don't know, they know themselves best. They know how they learn. They know who they want to learn from. It would, I just don't see how it could work better if it doesn't come from the mentee. More often, people that, I don't know, they're leading the program or whatever, you're gonna make a bad call. You're not really gonna know. So I like to hear from mentees. Who do they think they want to learn from? There's so much learning that needs to happen. And I would think that you want to learn different things from different people. I really don't think that, I think that it should always be the choice of the mentee who to learn from.
Yeah, I think to that end, and it goes to diversification of the force itself,
Mm-hmm.
being able to provide a myriad of mentors that can meet any desire that you need, right? Like, I'd be remiss to think, and I'm not going to put I can only put myself in my shoes. I can't imagine what other people are going through. But, when I was in academia, I was one of a handful of people of color that was in my program. And there was no person of color on the faculty that, there are issues that are germane to my personal experiences, that having a mentor in that role would have, not that I didn't have mentors, I had other mentors, but there were other things that are very unique and particular to my life experiences, that finding that level of commonality, like if I can imagine myself, if I were a woman student and having all male professors, and I want to sort of identify, I want to, because I see architecture through a woman's perspective that all these men can't possibly relate to. How can I find somebody that speaks my language, that oscillates at my frequency? And I think the profession being diversified enough to sort of allow, like you said, Lord, as a mentee to go, here's where I think my path lies. There's somebody that can shepherd me through that, as opposed to not having it available. I think that would be the inverse. Like, I found other mentors just because there weren't any, not that necessarily if there was somebody that was of color in a higher position, that I would necessarily seek them out, because they may not be the ideal person that I'm, it just doesn't mean just because they look like me, automatically it's like a one-to-one. No, that's not necessarily how it works. But providing that sort of platter of variety allows one to sort of make choice decisions as to, how they see their lives, their trajectory moving forward. So I think it's important to be, that's why we're here. We're all people of different races and gender, and this calling on this forum, which is great. The industry and the world needs a lot more of that sort of allows choices.
I'm going to go to the next scenario. So running short of time. Say you lead mentorship in your organization. What do you think about the advantages or disadvantages of one-to-one mentorship versus group mentorship programs like the AIASF mentorship program that is sponsoring this event? If you don't know yet, the AIA mentorship program is a mentorship. So you have emerging professionals, mid-level unlicensed, mid-level licensed, what they call seasoned professionals like myself. And so the idea is that seasoned just as from the emerging professionals, because they're on the computer and they know a lot of stuff. So I've learned a lot from my group. I've had a group and vice versa. So the more junior members will seek out other people in our group for advice. So we would do a lot of things that as a group. We would go to tour sites. We would bring speakers into our at a dinner conversation at a restaurant to talk to us about how they moved up the profession. So it allows for more. And I've talked to David about before as something to look at for even Perkins Eastman, because I know there's that tendency, a lot of people wanted to meet with other people, but the thing is now, do you see analysts any advantage of the one-to-one group mentorship programs? Any of you?
I mean, I think that the group programs really work well in a kind of broader sense, right? With professional development, the how-tos, et cetera. But there's nothing like the one-to-one. I think I'm a firm believer. I mean, I'm a teacher at heart. I think the one-to-one is where you really reach at the core of the individual. What is it that they want to do? What, you know, it's a very intimate thing in a way. Everybody's got their own paths. I think sometimes I find staff that think of themselves a certain way and they sell themselves short, right? And unless you have that one-to-one discussion and look at themselves in a different way and how opportunities do exist, and here's how to get there. I don't know how that would happen in a group setting, but I do think the group setting definitely provides assistance in kind of, you know, the umbrella, the bigger setting, the more professional kind of help that might be out there for you. So it's got to be a combination of the two.
David, what do you?
I mean, I touched on it already. I think, you know, for us as an organization, we're on the same page with Lourdes. It's the opportunity to dive in. I think for us, you know, yes, there's mentee has that connection, but it is, you're right. You know, a mentor approaches it differently. The activity of mentoring, if there is that one-to-one. We in fact limit our mentors now to only 2 mentees, and mentees can only have 1 mentor, and so that it is really a very sort of well, it's a peer to, you know, one kind of relationship. And there are others. We have all the professional development stuff, women's leadership, diversity, equity, which tend to be much more group centric. And there's a lot of informal mentoring that happens, you know, through those discussion platforms. Mita, you've seen how so many different organizations tackle some of these. What have been some of the comparative, you know, what have you seen that's worked well? Some of the firms you've
yeah, I think you know, first, most importantly, is making it intentional, right? And creating a structure around that intentionality. I think the different firms that I've worked for, they've handled it very differently, from the very broad, very tentacled approach that I was exposed to at RTKL, that obliterated this sort of like siloed notion of mentorship. It's not a linear thing. It actually has spokes everywhere. And I thought that in itself had inherent beauty in it. Now, when I moved to another organization and I floated that idea, it was almost like you were shunned. It was like, oh, how dare you? Like, that's not how it works. It would never work. And we're just not organized that way. And then seeing different versions of it that isn't that first experience, but that still works. It's very potent. Like now at Perkins and Will, the sort of mentorship program is built around this structure called Thrive, where the idea is to help you thrive. And you have typically, even me as a design director, you know, I oversee the design culture of the studio of about 75 people and every work that's going out. But I have 2 people underneath me as my mentees. I'm the mentor to them. And they are the two of the leading the senior designers in the office. We're supposed to meet every 3 months. It flashes on your screen and reminds you, sends it to them, sends it to you, make an appointment. But I'm like, we're so busy. We're working on the same deadline. Like, we don't have time for this. I'm like, you know what? Let's grab coffee. Let's make sure we grab coffee today. Or let's make sure we grab lunch. And we'll be sitting there at lunch and just talking, you weave in personal stories with work stories, what's going on, what are you working on, like how's home life going, blah, blah, blah. At the end of it, I pick up the tab, I go, oh, nice Thrive session. And they go, oh, that was Thrive? I was like, yeah, why not? It doesn't have to be, we don't have to go sit in a conference room and, maybe
Right.
a pad to write. These things should be organic, it should be easy.
Right.
It's structured, you tend to hold back. You tend to just have this prescribed things that you want to talk about, which is always very helpful. But I think us doing it every 3 months allows the conversation to be ongoing. And I'm considered their champion, right? I'm championing them in this Thrive process. And I myself has a champion above me in the Thrive process. That you check in with, how's it going in your new position? Like, are you getting hang of the studio? So is this sort of like organic, even though it has a structure to it, I try to at least push the people underneath me. I'm like, if I hear somebody, if I go by a conference room and I poke my head in and they're like, oh yeah, we'll be out, we're having a Thrive. I'm like, guys, next time, can you just do that? Go get coffee. It's a nice day. Go grab lunch. Do it at a happy hour. Just make it easy and let it flow. So, as you're saying, David, different organizations treat it different as long as it's present, as long as people are talking. I think it's a good thing.
Guys, there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I want to go to the last scenario for tonight. And I know we're running over time a little bit now. So is it a problem for you guys just hang on for a little while?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, good. I mean, not too.
Not too late because you're in New York.
Ahead of me, I'm on the East Coast, so.
Okay, no problem. But you never sleep anyway, David, right?
I know, right? Plenty of time to sleep when you're dead, right?
Right. So the last one is, how can mentors improve their opportunity to advocate for their mentees if they're from different departments, offices, etc.? And how would this relate to mentoring architects without borders? Because we thought a lot about when we picked that title, what does it really mean? And just hearing from all three of you, coming from different backgrounds, different mentorship programs in your office, I can see where there's no one fixed answer of what the program could be or should be. But is there an advantage to have it more from different places? Like David mentioned, it's a global program at Perkins Eastman. So Shanghai can mentor, but I haven't seen any people that much because of the time difference and all. Is there a strong interest between different departments, offices? I mean, Lourdes, you mentioned a little bit that you guys stick primarily to the Bureau of Architecture, but is it something that would matter that if you were to have a mentorship change with Perkins and Will or Perkins Eastman, the programs there where there's an exchange? Is that something that would be interesting, perhaps? Just throwing out the question.
I mean, this question, I would think it would be interesting to hear from Mighty and David, because you both have offices in all different cities, right? So how would you mentor somebody that would be interested to try out a different office? How does that work in your larger organization? I would be interested to hear that. But to answer your question, Roland, in our department, I don't see anything wrong with mentoring with private sector, like sharing ideas or having private sector mentor, work with individuals in our department. The tricky part with working in a public organization is that we have so many other layers of things that we have to do as an organization, given the work that we do for our great city. You know, we have a lot of other, I'll say, bureaucratic layers that we have to, you know, hoops that we have to jump through, and we have to mentor our staff on how to do that if they're looking for a career in public service. It's very different. I would say for me, that was one of the hardest things coming in from private, and only being here 4.5 years to kind of learn, you know, how, wow, you know, it was kind of a little bit shocking and overwhelming. How do I navigate through this other world of departments and regulation, and, you know, all these other layers that we have to learn. And one of the big things that I feel like firmly now having been in the department for 4 years, is that I feel like the staff really needs mentorship and how to navigate those waters, because not only, you know, are you working on your projects and your career and trying to grow there, but how do you grow as a civil servant? How do you sell your work, you know, when you're bound by crazy budgets, and you know, the mayor's office could come in and just say, hey, forget that, I need you to work on this, right? That kind of stuff happens. So how do you navigate that and continue to kind of keep your focus and be inspired to do the best work that you can do and that you want to do, and keep that passion? It's very hard. So while I love the idea of kind of mentorship happening between private and public, I would say that would be great in terms of some things, but then what we do and working in an organization is just so specific to our organization that it's kind of a little tricky. You know, it's really apples and oranges sometimes.
Yeah, I think Lourdes, thank you. You were sort of asking me and David to, you know, as our organization sort of approaches it. I think that idea is actually highly encouraged at Perkins and Will. And I'm going to sort of answer that question from a design standpoint. There's a very active and fertile cross-pollination of thought across, as it relates to design across the firm, and it's highly encouraged. And it sort of is couched around mentorship, really, where any given studio office, especially as it relates to their design directors, is supposed to, as part of their sort of value judgment, maybe that's not the right word, of how they are assessed, they're supposed to engage other thought leaders across the studios and share their projects to sort of say, here's one thing we're working on. It's almost like you get a review on a project, right? Like any new project coming on, you get a fair fresh eyes to look at it, you get comments on it. Feedback is a very active participatory occurrence. But with that comes an opportunity to actually allow two design directors to sort of work at a micro level outside of that if they're in your region, you know, obviously multiple offices across the globe, is hard to sort of make schedules work. You know, there might be a way that you can sort of liaise with people in your region and create a micro version of it where you sort of share thoughts, you visit each other's offices and look at each other's work, and you sort of build on that synergy. And I think within that, that's a version of mentorship. It's a different kind of mentorship. It's not, you know, again, I like to look at mentorship in all its glory. Like, it's not just me, you sitting with you at a coffee. It's like me shepherding a student through academia, or, you know, this iteration, which is working with a different office. And recently I have an opportunity to work with our Shanghai office to sort of liaise with them and share thoughts. And I'm excited to get that stuff, but unfortunately they're dealing with COVID and all that stuff that with the lockdown that's going on. So we haven't been able to get that. But I see that at an organizational level, a different version of mentorship that now is sort of couched around design and the design processes that I look forward to. So at Perkins and Will, that's sort of, and I would say when I was at HFK, it was completely different. And that's the way the organization is built. Every office is autonomous. They control their own design. It's almost like eyes on your own paper, kind of thing. And it works for them, right? Like that's just the way the construct is. But I think in this particular sense, it's a different construct that I find intriguing in terms of broadening this notion of mentorship.
And I'll just jump in. I think, you mentioned sort of the archicale and the many tentacled kind of, and ours is quite similar to that. And our champions are quite conscious of when they're looking at when mentees have made their selection, are some of them, not just, within the sort of the design lanes of the firm, but, are they in accounting, right? We've had people who have wanted to better understand some of the financial aspects of the organization or the digital aspects. And because everyone in the organization is, eligible to participate in much of the organization does, there's lots of opportunity for folks to make some of those pairings. We wouldn't pair outside of Perkins Eastman for this program. That's a strategic question, we have other platforms for that kind of industry engagement beyond the firm, but it is an interesting question. But I think it's that idea of going back to a sense of curiosity. Lourdes, I can imagine even within city government, it's sitting there and being like, oh, I know so and so in the in the budgeting and budget management office, let me give them a call, right? And and sort of being able to find some of those platforms to connect. But rolling on this question, I think Lourdes is, particularly I run this with my university clients, particularly on the public side. They have very strict procurement processes. Mm-hmm. They have to sort of, that's true for lots of government. And so that is where sort of the connecting across can get thorny very quickly.
Yeah. When you're responsible for the work that you do is funded by the public money, right? You have a different level of responsibility, and you're held to a different level of accountability. You are, and I'm still kind of learning how that web, because it's really complicated. It is a web. It's so interesting. The other thing that I found really fascinating coming into public service is that when you start at public works, you have a DSW number. You're a disaster service worker. So not only are you an architect, but as a civil servant, if there's an earthquake here,
Lourdes, your voice is cracking. Maybe turn off the video.
Called upon to go out and investigate what's happened, tag buildings. You have a different level of responsibility as well. So it's super interesting. I was always like, I'm amazed about what the civil servants do. It's really just beyond what we do as architects. It's a responsibility that we also have to our citizens, to the city. So, and I think that's good. I think it brings it out of just being on the boards, right? And creating these great structures. It's like, oh, we also have a responsibility to our community and to the people. And I think it's a nice thing to be exposed to as an architect. I think it kind of opens your eyes in a different way.
Thank you, guys. It's almost like there's so many questions that we haven't answered yet. I know, just touching it, right? And in a sense, I almost thought, well, maybe I should have made it a 2-hour session. But I realized that, okay, that would make David have to stay up. So we want to recognize that he's got to go to bed too. So to round it up, we just want to summarize that the discussion seems like there's a lot of consensus, but the thing I found out was that that's the thing that Midi mentioned. It's ingrained in our profession as architects to mentor others. And I was reading that there's this huge change right now in our society. It's more of the contractors, where they're saying about 80% of the new contractors coming in are young, emerging ones, and there's nobody there to supervise them. So when we go out to the job site, we have to tell the project engineers and the contractor how to do an RFI, how to do a submittal. But they have a even bigger problem than we have, in a sense, in the profession. But also realize that mentorship really across many different areas. This past weekend, I went to a memorial service for one of the architectural reps that worked with us on the new Stanford Hospital, and he belonged to the Bohemian Club. And I don't know if you guys know about the Bohemian Club, but it's a very exclusive club. Men only before. I think there's not a lot of women, but it's you pay a lot of money to go in. Lots of presidents belong to that, and they meet in this 19-day camp in the woods, okay, where they do all the skit stuff. But they also have a very expensive, very large clubhouse building. But the thing that was interesting to me was during the memorial service, they talked a lot about mentorship of all things, how the older people would mentor a lot of the younger members who were coming into the business, and that's how they grew. And that was more than one time, and how mentorship was really an issue for them also. So even in that group, this is the men's club, that very few people have gone into. So we weren't even allowed to use our to take pictures of the space. Is very exclusive, and most wives of these members are not never allowed to even go into clubs. But their mentorship thing was a strong thing for them. So I think in our the things that we've been talking about tonight, we haven't even touched on that part. But I think that it can also go into other areas. But there are other things brought up I thought was interesting was the thing one-to-one versus group. I heard that the consensus seems to be one-to-one mentorship is the best way to go. But I think that the AIA mentorship program that we have at AIA really provides that other avenue where you have group mentorship, so you can meet other mentors, and that provides that, and it's open to all AIA members and non-AIA members. So it provides that for group mentorship, where if it isn't provided in a firm, and it works really well for networking, especially. I mean, there's a lot of people I would never have met without going into that program, and people that go into it, even we have people from the public service go into that area, and so that's just to start out. I know there are a lot of questions. I know there were principals that have registered and signed up for this event, and I'm sure some of them had questions too. I don't know if they were looking to start a mentorship program in their office, but if they do, reach out to us. But I'm gonna thank Lourdes Garcia, Mede Akinsade, and David Levo for being our panelists for tonight, and really making us think about the whole issue of mentorship. Because if you go to the web, there's so much written on it. So I'm going to turn it back right now to, unless you guys have a parting comment you want to make before we close. Anybody?
The only one I would say, thank you, Roland and Brandon and team for the opportunity, and Mide and Lourdes to meet both of you and have really great discussion for those that chatted. I think one thing I might think is an interesting question for a future session would be, for the big firms and big organizations, the ability to consciously steward mentorship at an organizational level is something that can be done. But I do think that there is a wonderful power and strength in the IA that for particularly small firms and sole practitioners to be able to connect in a way that's incredibly invaluable. And, you know, so I always applaud the AIA for being able to fill that role for our industry, because I think if there's one takeaway, is that no matter where you are in life, no matter the size of the organization you're at, mentoring is important the whole way through till we're done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also want to thank the AIA for inviting me. I think it's an important, very, very important topic. I mean, you could have several sessions on this and get a lot of great information and ideas on how to make mentorship work. You know, I want to thank David and Mighty, because I've learned a lot from both of you. And I actually think working in organizations as large as the ones that both of you work in, mentorship is even harder, because you have just such a larger umbrella, right? You know, people can kind of get lost through the cracks there. I've worked in corporate offices, and you can, if you're not paying attention, you know, you could be doing steady deals for your entire life. You know, so I do think that mentoring in those organizations is really, it's harder, and you have to pay even more, you know, attention. So I think it's great that both of you are so involved and helping produce, you know, better architects out there for our profession. Yeah, I agree with you, David. The AIA is definitely a good resource for smaller firms, especially you know, how to do things, how to pair up with each other, how to help each other. It provides resources that you may not be able to have as a small firm that the AIA can help you with. So great resource. I mean, it's good all around. I really enjoyed this discussion a lot and meeting all of you.
Yes, I concur, and it's a pleasure just being on the panel with both you, Lourdes, David, and Roland, and as well as Brandon and everybody in the audience. It's a great conversation that is at sort of like at the, you know, like I was saying in the beginning, you can't not mentor being an architect. So it's a lifeline of the profession. I would also like to say that from a mentee's perspective, that mentorship happens everywhere. You know, it's sort of like, you know, there's an aspect of it, you know, there's learning versus mentorship, right? You know, am I learning something, or am I being sort of shepherded, or being sort of channeled towards my goal as I see it? And I think being proactive and being, you know, they always say, there's this saying that goes, the squeaky wheel gets, I forgot how they say this. The squeaky wheel gets, yes, yes. You know, especially when you're working in a large organization, it's easy to be intimidated by just the work, but just the circumstances, and then these people that you revere. But I will say that, you know, being proactive and just sort of getting outside your comfort level to sort of fight for what you want, and how really defining your own career, which means you reaching outside of any construct that might exist, even with, let's say there's a construct of mentorship, even going outside of that and beyond that to sort of seek guidance and knowledge. Again, it's very different than the sort of day-to-day learning, which one could you know, argue that that's a form of mentorship. But that sort of being proactive and not waiting for things to sort of come to you is part of it as well. And so, you know, I'm very, I'm a big believer in that. You know, when I say mentorship happens everywhere, I remember a situation at Smith Group. There was this amazing project manager that I work with. She's she's older and she used to be, she's Israeli, and I think she used to be in the army because she's very, Esther, she's very like forthright, like she speaks with such gravitas, right? And I remember the first day I started that it was switched group. I was sitting right outside of my office and she's talking on the phone. You could hear her down the hall, like when she's talking, and she was screaming at a client for not paying their bills. And I remember, I just never laughed so hard when she was like, "I'm sorry, this is America. You got to pay your bills." I was like, "Oh my God." And she's talking to a foreign client. But I learned so much from her sitting outside her door. When project, and I remember one thing I've never forgotten. I was very young in my career. She was talking to a project manager about foundations and pile, these foundations that they were done for this build, sheeting and shoring and stuff. And I remember I could hear her, like she's right there. It's almost like she's talking to me. I just brought out my sketchbook and was sketching what I thought she was saying. And I swear to God, I still refer to that. Like when I'm drawing, when I'm designing a foundation, a parking garage or whatever, I know what goes into it. So again, you could say it's learning versus mentorship. I use her as a way to sort of learn how to be a good PA. When I'm in a design path. So I would encourage everybody, just be proactive, seek it out. It comes in different forms. It's not always the prescribed, oh, this is the way we do it. There's all these avenues that surround you that you can sort of leverage and take advantage of. So, I hope everybody had a good time, and thank you all for just having me be a part of the panel. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Brandon, and he's going to close us out tonight. Brandon.
Great. Yeah, thank you to all the speakers tonight, and a couple of you already touched on the fact it'd be nice to continue the conversation, and we actually are going to have a part 2 of this, probably with a focus on the international aspect as well, with along with the International Practice Committee here. That is tentatively set. We have a June date here. It'll probably be a bit earlier than that, and then again, this is the kickoff event for our speed match, which we're hoping to get started in June. We're working on the format of that, if it's going to be all Zoom or maybe a hybrid event, but more details to come with that. And again, social events and all kinds of reasons to get together throughout the year. So stay tuned for that. And then if you do have any questions or you want to connect with us or any of the speakers that you've met today, feel free to reach out to us at our links here, our social networks, and we can put you in contact with the right people. So again, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Roland, for hosting. And I hope everyone has a great evening. And see everyone.
Thank you. Happy mentoring. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody else for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.